right, well, good evening. We welcome you here tonight. We're going to get started right on time as best as we can. And we have a few that will probably be joining us online, but we're glad that you're here live and in person. It just makes it that much more meaningful and helpful as we seek to interact with one another, especially when it comes to questions. It's a little bit more difficult to do that from a virtual audience as it is from a live. One of the things, again, I want to just remind you of, there is a handout in the back in the foyer. This is a way for you to track important information and write that down so that you can make sure that you heard us correctly. On the back side of it, you'll find that there is a place there for notes for question and answer that will come at the end. So we encourage you to avail yourself of jotting yourself a quick reminder. You're going to hear some things in the process here tonight that may spark a question, may spark something that you want to follow through with, and that is your opportunity. When we do the Q&A, I have two gentlemen that will move with you to help answer or get that microphone in front of you. Please wait until the microphone is there to ask your question, and it's not to intimidate you, it's just because the fact that we do have people that are listening online, and it would help them to know if their question is being asked. And that way, then, we can try our best to answer that. Now, here's the other thing. The reason why we also gave this to you is we want you to, be thinking through things. And as the weeks ahead and days ahead come, at times there are questions that come to our mind. Oh, boy, I wish I would have asked that. This is not the one and done time, okay? As we're going through this, this is a process by which we are trying to build a building, and as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither will Grace Baptist Church's facility be built in a day. So we will try to answer as many questions as we can. Let me also explain a little bit of the intent of this meeting, and that is that we're going to seek to stay as pretty much an overview of the project instead of drilling down deep into things. But there are times when questions are going to arise and there is a deep concern, so we're going to say that we will do our best to answer. But if we feel that a question is going to be a little more exhaustive than what this meeting is intended, we do not want to shut that question down. We're not saying you can't ask those questions. We may just ask that you maybe stay and let's talk about those things afterward. Or it may be the type of question where, right now at this point in time, we don't have that answer. So we're going to need to research that and figure that out and get back to you. So please understand that we're not going to deflect. We will try to answer all of your questions as best we can within the time that we have allotted. I'm going to open the word of prayer and then just get us a little bit of some introduction and get into the more of the heart of our meeting here tonight. Father, we're grateful for our members and for those who are passionate about Grace Baptist Church and its ministries. Lord, I thank you for every life that's represented here and those who may be watching. I ask, Lord, that you will guide us as we walk through and explain and interact with this process of the building. And Lord, may you be glorified and honored in everything that we do. And it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, let me do something first, and that is by way of introduction. I want to introduce to you some of the men that are sitting behind me here. This is the Darcy, the Disaster Recovery Rebuild Committee. These men meet on a regular basis. We are currently meeting twice a month as the calendars allow. Les Compton, Tom Crum, Greg Estes, Stan Haber, myself, John Parshall, Matt Pollock, Paul Snyder, Mike Swanson, Alan Walker. There's 10 of us, 9 voting members. Stan is a member by de facto of being our project manager, but we meet consistently, and there are then other subcommittees, and Stan will be talking about that in just a little bit. Then, as we move forward as well, I think I can here. Right there it is. Nope, let me go back one. There it is. Some other key figures I want to just remind us of, and that is James Tyson, who is our construction manager, Tyson Associates Construction, and they are active, very active in our construction project. They are the leads. They're the ones that gather all the bids for us. They do all the heavy lifting when it comes to managing the subs and everybody that's going to be doing the project. Technically, our site is right now basically owned by Tyson. They control who comes on, who's there on a regular basis. They are the ones that we defer to when it comes to all things related to our project. Rardon and Carroll, Stephen Carroll, we are very familiar with him. He was here with us very early on in the project, and they are consistently a part of this. The design phase is a phase that they will be taking the lead, and we're starting to change that now from the design phase as more and more is becoming completed. The blueprints are being drafted and done, permits are in, things like this. Then Stephen Carroll and his associates will be taking sort of a backseat to Tyson, and Tyson will be taking the lead, working with us directly. So just understanding that we're in that transition. There are still some things that Rardon Carroll is very heavily involved with, especially on the school side as they're finishing up a lot of the construction documents, and then Tyson will be taking more control of that in the future. I want to also just mention to you the guiding principles that we as a committee are following, and just to put this before you to let you know over the last year what Darcy has been seeking to make sure that we are keeping in front of us as our goals as a committee, and that is that our membership will be strong and committed to the vision of GBC-GBA as articulated and demonstrated during the recovery. We will have done all within our power to glorify God and not tarnish the name of Christ to everyone involved in our campus. And then we will have an appropriate facility for corporate worship, teaching and training of all ages and fellowship. Our support of missionaries will be no less than the level of 2019, except possibly by natural attrition, with the commitment to grow missions in proportion to the ongoing growth of our own congregational facilities. We will have a modern integrated academy that's inherently competitive in this region with a solid student base and plan for potential growth, and we will be financially sound and sustainable. The unusual cash flow during the recovery will have been used well and fully. So the idea is that we are going to manage the resources that is entrusted to us through FEMA, through insurance, and to make us whole again. That is our greatest desire, our greatest hope, and that is what we are working for without putting our church in any encumbrance. And that's what we're striving for. And so there are other facets of this to not lose sight of our mission objectives as far as with the even foreign missions as a part of that, the academy, and then all the other things that we do to give us, again, space to be able to minister as we were before the event. And so at this time, I'm going to ask Stan Haber to come. And he is going to be giving to us a little bit of an overview of where we were and give us some insight into some of the direction that we're currently in. I appreciate the work that Stan is doing for us and the level of commitment that he comes into. I've told him repeatedly he's worth more than his weight in gold. He's a small man, but he can put the food away. I've watched him at a lot of lunches. But at the same time, I really appreciated his heart for Grace as not just the school, but as a church. He is a leading voice many times to calling us as committee members to do a devotional together, to pray about certain aspects of this, and to just keep reminding us. And it's great to have a team member like him working with us. So I'm going to ask him to come and take this next section for us.
Thank you very much, Pastor. Yeah, I do like to eat. Guilty as charged. Never wasted a calorie for sure. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this tonight. I'm so excited about what's going on, and I'm so excited to share with you a little bit of our timeline on what we have been doing. So let's just kind of do an overview. Tonight I'm going to go over the form of what we are doing. After I get done, Pastor is going to talk about the function, the ministries, and vision. So in talking about the form, we're going to talk about some facts and features. We're going to talk about the site layout and the current development. And then we're going to talk about the one thing that is on my mind, I'm assuming it's on your mind, and it's the schedule. When do we transition in? You know, that is the big question. So here we go, facts and features. How sobering. 406 days ago, 58 weeks ago, we had an event that touched all of us in a way that we would have never imagined. But we've responded, and we have put processes in place. We've already gone ahead and taken care of our demolition, cleared off the property. We are deep into design. We started design almost immediately. Hundreds and hundreds of drawings that we've been developing since last May. Ministry outreach. The campus is not a dead place. I mean, it is a thriving place. There's several ministry outreaches that are currently occurring from that campus on the corner of Shallowford and Jenkins. Construction, we're starting to get cranked up. As you've noticed, we've moved a lot of dirt. We had a lot of dirt to move, 25 acres, and we're moving around. And it's going to really start taking shape over the next couple of months. Oops. And of course, ultimately, we're going to talk about moving in. So planning, there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes. As Pastor mentioned, we're having regular Darcy meetings every other week since April, 26 of them actually, for about 3 hours plus every time we meet. Design meetings, 37 of them since May. Again, a couple hours a shot. A lot of FEMA meetings, a lot of outside support where we contacted our local political representatives as well as the Department of Homeland Security, and construction meetings that we just started given where we are in the project. So, one other set of meetings I wanted to mention before I leave this particular topic of planning is sub-teams. And sub-teams is a real undefined, perhaps, term, but I can tell you that what we've done is the scope is so vast that we have broken up into multiple groups, a total of 18 groups, represented by church board members, school board members, church staff, school staff, administrators, deacons, volunteers, the parents. The range is wide because the scope is wide. Just to give you an idea, we're covering areas of signage, audiovisual, IT networking, security, playgrounds, finishes, furnishings, mission housing, kitchen services, long-term maintenance, athletic fields, library media center, church interior design, academy interior design, and outdoor learning spaces, fine art spaces, and FEMA DDD scoping. And that particular team put in a lot of hours to provide data to FEMA that is going to be the basis of what FEMA gives us as far as reimbursement. So, as I said, dozens and dozens of people and with different backgrounds have contributed and continue to contribute to what we're doing. So what's going on now? Well, like I said, we are moving a lot of dirt. We are doing stormwater design, installation, and foundation preparation, and we're currently involved heavily in some mission outreach on the site. So for the stormwater work and the foundation preparation, I have resorted to putting up this multicolored slide. Kind of busy, but I like this thing because it's one of these pictures worth 1,000 words. And what this slide does is it tells me how much dirt I'm cutting, how I'm cutting our site down, and how I have to fill it in. So when you look at this, if it's blue, I've got to fill that in, and the deeper the blue, the more I've got to fill in. Likewise, if I've got red or orange, the redder it is, the more I've got to cut. So you can see we've got some deep holes and we've got some high peaks. What we've been doing is working in 5 different areas over the last couple of months. Unfortunately, most of it is back the other side of the hill and you can't see it. And that is because the first thing the city required us to do was to take erosion control measures, which meant we needed to go into that upper left-hand corner where I've got the pond labeled. We put in a detention pond that's about 1 acre in size. It's a real wow type event. When you guys finally get to see it, I think we're going to be batting 1,000 every time someone sees it. It just, the pictures do not do it justice. But it's capturing 25 acres of water, or a large part of 25 acres, because from about halfway across the church roof back toward the property, all that is draining back to that pond. What that pond has allowed us to do is maximize the rest of our property where we don't have to put in expensive stormwater collection devices, a lot of storage underneath the parking lot. We don't have to use our property along Shallowford Road at the missions house for a detention pond like we thought we were going to have. So that pond back there is very important. You can see coming clockwise, I've highlighted the orange and reddish section on the new property. We are cutting a lot of that dirt down, upwards of 11 feet in about a 200 by 200 size lot. It's getting cut down there from 7 to 11 feet. The good news is that in procuring that new property, that dirt is probably the best dirt we have for laying underneath foundations. So we have been trucking it as you come clockwise down to the lower corner by the roundabout to the church pad and been filling in that area. And as you've noticed, the church pad is now finished. We're now preparing for some foundation work. And then going clockwise, we're working over there again along the old Wesleyan property to start extending the soccer football fields. So a lot going on the site. Again, most of it's been back where you couldn't see it, but that is going to change really quickly because as you see, I have added a couple of labels here in the middle on the right that say school. Now that we've got the church pad done, we are going to be moving into a mode where we're going to start scraping down the property and lowering that dirt to a level where we're going to be able to start pouring foundations for the school. Ultimately, I put a few more labels on there. You can see going around, I've added toward the top the baseball and softball field. That dirt work will be coming soon after we start the work for the school. One thing I did want to note, you can see the parking label that I've got toward the top on the right. The parking spaces, as we've talked about in the past, are going to be all along Jenkins and Shalford. Our parking along Jenkins is going to stretch really up to that property line that we had between the old property and the new property. A whole lot of parking. Here we go. Well, it's not responding. Here we go. So, all right, the next part. What's going on now? Got three things here I'm going to talk about. The first is Children's Center. As we are well aware, the Children's Center went into operation back in December. Many of you were very generous in contributing to the goods that they needed to transition to operation. I'm excited to report that not only are they back in that new modernized building, but come August, word has gotten out and around town, and we will be in a mode of having a waiting list for several ages. Is that correct? That is correct. All right. So very exciting. So we're continuing our outreach to the community that way. Because that facility is built the way it is, and it has the facilities and the playground that it does, we're using it as part of our Spanish church outreach, where there's a bi-weekly ladies study that's being done on Saturday. So the ladies are coming to participate in the study, and they're bringing their kids. Started that in April. In addition, we are doing a construction team outreach. Again, very, very important, where we have started to make a meal for the construction team once a week, recognizing that if we can build some one-on-one relationships with these guys, they're going to be out there for months. We've got a great opportunity as they come out to start developing some relationships and starting some conversations, having some spiritual discussions about where they are and how they view eternity. So I'm extremely excited about that. It has been very well received. The turnout has been great. All right, so what's going on next? We're going to be working on the church foundation and building, fields and the southeast corner parking. And you can see I put up my orange and blue map again alongside a great aerial photograph that Kevin had taken. So I'm going to go to the aerial photograph, and I just want to point out in a few areas, I'm standing on the corner looking toward the Children's Center there. Going clockwise, Children's Center, traffic circle, and the church pad. Then I go up along Jenkins Road where you see that gray spot. That's going to be the parking is going to go up through there. That's where the construction trailers are right now. But you go up to that property line again at the north property. You can see a brown spot where we've been cutting out dirt. Going clockwise around, you can see our 1 acre detention pond. Then coming back alongside the left-hand side, we have started moving some preliminary dirt work. All right, so here we go. The question, right? When do we move in? All right. Now, I put up a slide at the beginning that showed I'm tracking days. I've been tracking days since like day one. And these guys will tell you I number everything. So I even numbered the pages in my notebook. True, I'm guilty. So I have got a date in mind, but I'm not going to give you a date tonight. However, I can tell you that we are on track to be back in the church next spring of 2022. Is that closer to Christmas or is that closer to Easter? Well, there's a lot of factors. I mean, even after we get our certificate of occupancy from the fire marshal, we're not going to just go out to Home Depot and buy $40,000 worth of stuff and move it in one weekend, right? It's going to take some planning. And that's those sub-teams that I mentioned are part of that transition planning. But I can tell you spring of 2022 right now is fully supported by what our general contractor is doing. And the academy, fall of 2022. And again, not sure just where in fall of 2022, but it all falls in 2022. So with that, I'm going to transition and hand the baton off to Pastor.
I think we need to give Stan a round of applause for the hard work he's been doing. Appreciate it, Stan. Amen. He is tenacious and keeps us on our toes and always is keeping the meetings moving along and in line, and just really appreciate the work he's been doing. Kind of as a segue from sort of the events of the past, I wanted to share a couple of pictures with you. You say, okay, that does not look like anything I've seen on a virtual drawing. I want to draw attention to this because these are our old pews, and they are sitting in a church in Texas. And I just wanted you to understand how far Grace's reach has been. So I think that's pretty interesting. I say that to say that God has used this event, and a lot of our attention has been, I think, rightly so, has been focused predominantly up until this point more on the idea of what was. But what I want to do is give us really thinking about the projection. What is it that we're moving towards? As I read Scripture and I think about what Scripture has to say, it's interesting to me how little Scripture talks about buildings, except when you're dealing with one key structure, and that's usually the temple. It's very dangerous to extrapolate temple structures to what we're trying to build here. That is not really an appropriate correlation, that same sense. But the same aspect, what I do find interesting is how much Scripture, especially in the New Testament, talks about buildings when it comes to people, though. And it refers to the organic structure, the idea of us as a humanity, us as believers, as the church, as the body of Christ. And he does refer to us in a very building-oriented foundations and structures and things that are being grown, and there is a real sense of an organic structure. I thought I would remind us a little bit again of our mission as we're thinking about this, and that is that as a church, we seek to glorify God by delighting in and declaring the person and the work of Jesus Christ. And in that sense, then, of what we're doing, as I look at all these wonderful pictures and I begin to think about all the different apparatuses that we have, and one of these days, what it's going to be really neat is we're going to throw that big old board in a trash can. Because the fact that this project is done and there isn't any more need to draw our attention to something other than just take a snapshot of it, and once in a while we'll bring it up for posterity. But beyond that, it won't have a purpose. It's done. But life is never done. I always say that the greatest thing that I have as a pastor is job security, because there's always people, more people to reach. And as I was thinking about the relationship of this building project, I always want to draw us back to the fact that in the midst of this, we have to keep in mind that there are souls involved and that faith is always involved. What I love about where we are as a project is, again, we are again turning the phase of this building construction phase to, again, thinking about how is it that it ties in with all that we claim to be as the organic structure, the church, the body of Christ, being able to use even this structure as something that pertains to and identifies with us as a church. I should have, and after I was thinking about this, there were two pictures I wish I could have put up, and that was watching Tom Crum stand out in the middle of a parking lot with a whole bunch of construction workers around him, as we've taken some pictures here just recently, last week or two, and seeing how God is allowing Grace Baptist Church to already have just a small role to play in penetrating into hearts and lives and maybe taking down some barriers that we could eventually see God potentially start some intentional conversations with some men who really do need to hear about Jesus Christ. And doing it with some sort of a food in hand or something like that, but yet at the same time, just being real, being human, and letting our lives influence and maybe touch their lives. I'm excited about that. And at the heart of this, it reminds me that we are building a building, yes, but inside of that building, if there aren't places for us to think about bringing souls, then really, what's the point? What I do understand is that this area doesn't necessarily need another building. They don't need another church building. They need a real church. And that's a church that really is focused on the souls of people. Now, also tied to that is the concept of faith. In Scripture, there's two ways to talk about faith. You understand faith as the body of what we believe, the body of faith, the doctrinal standpoint, the viewpoint, the organization of what we believe. We call it being people of faith, the faith. But faith also is that sense of taking what is without sight and placing it truly fixated upon something very objective, meaning that there is something tangible and real. Even though I can't see it, I know it's to be true, and therefore I believe in something by faith. And what we try to do is, as a church, always bring that two portions together. There is this body of doctrine, this body of truth that we believe in, and we call it the faith-based system that we believe in, but it's not because it's delusional, or not just because of the fact that it's empty or that it is just something I grew up in, but because there is something truly objective, something that is substantial that I believe in. And I believe in a God that is just as real as I am. And so everything we're doing is really to maximize the reality that God is at work in humanity and that it takes faith to believe that, and there are parts of this that we just can't see. The other day I was sitting in one of the meetings and I mentioned to the guys, I said, you know what, I will be so excited when this project is done, when these buildings are built. And I think maybe I surprised a couple of them because maybe they thought I was saying that in exasperation, and it's really not an exasperation. It's mainly because of the fact that this is temporal. Everything that we're trying to build is really something that is temporary. It's a tool. And I really want us to see us using these tools to get back to the concept of really ministering and effectively reaching souls by the expression of our faith and having a place that we can truly do that and do that effectively. And I'm excited about that. But I'll tell you, this stuff just gets trivial at sometimes. But at the same point, here's the other thing that I have to keep reminding myself, and that is, for whatever reason, God has said, this is what you need to be doing. And so just as much as it is difficult and sometimes to understand, it's by faith. Okay, Lord, what are you trying to teach us as a church? What am I needing to learn even as a pastor? As I am anticipating all of these things, Lord, where are you growing us? And what are you using this project to do to teach us and to help us and to guide us as a church? I want to see these things come to sight, don't you? To see a building truly, again, stand there as a testimony of God and His grace and His sufficiency and everything that He is doing, And I'm excited that we can do that, and I'm excited for everything that God has given to us in the sense that, yes, the Lord provided financially, and you're going to hear in just a minute how the Lord is continuing to confirm that He is going to provide for our church in ways that we would have, and I would say a month ago, right after the event, I can remember that Friday after Easter, standing there with a bunch of you deacons, having Steve and Carol spout out a number to us, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, insurance said they'll pay this. Stephen, you got to be wrong. There's no way we could build back with that much money. And he's putting out, well, at that time it was well over $30 million. And I about dropped my eye tooth in that small circle of us there. And to watch how the Lord has gathered us together as leadership to understand He's leading us and He's guiding us, and there isn't anything really for us to fear when God truly has the reins. And He reminds us again of what's most important. Just put your faith where it needs to be. Focus on the ministry that I've given to you. Keep reaching the souls, using the facilities that I'm going to provide, whether it's an SDA church or whether it's Morris Hill Baptist Church or whether it's Redemption Point, whether it's Bayside or whatever God allows us. And so in all of this, there isn't anything really to fear, because in the end of it, this is really God's doing. He led us to this point, and He continues to lead us to this point. And I'm very excited for us to move forward in the ways that God has seen fit to provide for Grace Baptist Church. I'm going to ask Mike to come, and he is going to discuss for us really some of the nuts and bolts. You've heard from Stan the sense of when, okay, yes. And, thinking about that, as time progresses, we'll be able to narrow that field down for you beyond the generals of spring and fall. But for now, as we move forward, we're excited for what God has done to answer some very strategic prayers as we're moving ahead. And one of those does come from the standpoint of how God has seen fit to provide for us in our finances. So, Mike, you come and explain some of the details, the specifics of this, and as we move forward here.
Okay, as we've heard already, and as we've all experienced, and if you have seen, there has been a lot of planning that has gone into everything that has come about so far. We've literally had hundreds of meetings and probably thousands of hours as they're added up, and most of it felt like a lot longer, but there's a lot of planning going into this, and we have learned so much as we've gone along. Pastor just mentioned a number that Steve threw out early on. Well, we've learned that there's more to that than just that number as we've planned and gone through these things. And so it's been a process of refining our budget, which is the main financial planning tool that we have, and we've honed that, we've refined it. A lot of things have educated us as we've poured into that number. We've learned a lot, and so we are at a point now where we feel pretty good about what that number will finally be and how it's going to come about, and want to share that with you tonight. I'm pushing the right button. Yes, there it is. Our budget cost is $54 million. That includes everything that we know will be going into the building. There will be the buildings themselves, the grading and the grounds that's going on now. There's demo and removal that has been part of that and will continue to be part of that. Various improvements that are being made to the site and to what our buildings will be. So there's a lot that goes into that. The architectural fees, the engineering fees, all of that makes up that cost of $54 million. That's a big number. It is for me. But as we've looked at that, and particularly as we've been educated over that, that is where we have come to. Now, the question will be, okay, well, how in the world are we coming up with $54 million? So Pastor alluded already to insurance. And that insurance number is right at $20 million that we have received the majority of. The last payment, the last installment that will make up that $20 million is in the pipelines now, and we expect to see that in the next couple of weeks. So $20 million from insurance, and that will be all that we will get from insurance. The remainder will be coming from, as we've talked about, FEMA. And so the question will be, well, are they really going to pay that amount? The answer is yes, they are really going to pay that amount. We have spent a good deal of time, planning time and paperwork time and meeting time, talking through all these things, and we have additional expense in hired consultants that are helping us specifically with FEMA, and everything points to the fact that yes, FEMA will pay this amount. We have alluded to the DDDs. That's our damage description and dimensions of the buildings that we had before. That is a very lengthy 482-page report process that was submitted to FEMA that they use in order to substantiate these amounts. And that has all been received. It is in the next form of review with FEMA. And there is nothing to indicate that they will not pay that full amount. So we are anticipating that, looking forward to that. As we came about the budget, you may have additional questions about the $54 million. This is entirely driven by anticipated expenses on what we know that we're going to spend. Not to have there are definitely going to be different buildings than we had before, but roughly the same square footage, but formatted and designed and built in a way that it's going to be even more productive for us and more useful for us as we go forward. It's all designed simply to make us whole again. Everything that we need, furniture, fixtures, and equipment that is going to be in that building so we can move into it and use it as soon as everything is done. And so all of this is what makes up that $54 million. This chart that you have kind of brings the expenses that we have planned for in alignment with the funding that we are anticipating. You can see in the green the $20 million, and on the outer circle, the green is the $20 million of insurance, the blue is the $34 million from FEMA. The inner circle breaks down how we anticipate those expenses will be spent. There's no necessarily a direct correlation to the color in the parts of the outer ring with the specific parts of the inner ring, but you can see inside that inner ring are the academy buildings, the church buildings, the grading, the grounds, the demo, the removal, and various improvements to the property and to the buildings that we have planned. So that is the $54 million answer to the question that we've had as we've been going through this. And again, everything that we've done thus far, everything that we've had in meetings with our consultants and with FEMA directly give us the anticipation that this will be paid in full. Lord willing, coming out at the end of this, we will have a $54 million campus that would be completely debt-free. And that's what we're anticipating, and have every reason to believe that that will be the case. That is all I've got as far as finances and the budget in a nutshell. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Pastor, and we're going to jump into a time of Q&A.
All right, so this is an opportunity for you to ask the questions that has just been niggling in the back of your brain ever since we walked in the door here together. I've got my two men ready with their microphones, and I also have a microphone up here somewhere. All right, Greg's ready to answer all the questions. There it is. All right. Yes. But this is the chance. If you would just raise your hand if you have a question, and we will put the microphone there in front of you, down here and back there. So go right there. Go ahead, Gwen. Hold on just a second. Let's. I think that's the orange one. We got it on. Good. Go ahead. Try it again, Gwen.
I wondered if this was going to include building 2 mission houses to replace the ones that were lost.
I'm going to have Paul answer that one.
From the insurance money, we've set aside that which was allocated to cover the 2 missions houses that were lost. We don't yet have the plan in place on how and where we'll build those, or what kind of housing we'll build back. The plan that we have begun to sketch out as a duplex look behind the current remaining missions house don't have time or budget for that in hand.
We're here, yes.
My question is this, right now, and I'm sure most everybody is aware of this, construction costs have gone way beyond out of sight. I mean, you hear about 2x4s that cost 4 times what they were a year ago or whatever. So what kind of surety do we have? I mean, these are huge numbers we're talking about, and it looks like, we're gonna get the 54 million, but what happens if the contractors come back and say, wow, these costs went up $10 million more than we anticipated? How do we deal with that?
And that's a really great question. I mean, and it's become even worse and worse, obviously over the last couple of months. In fact, when we get to the point where the newspaper is catching up with the story and they're writing about construction costs, it's really bad. And they've been doing that. So our general contractor, however, is working with highly accurate drawings. And in doing that, he gave us estimates at the beginning that had a certain amount of contingency in them. Those contingencies have been sufficient right now to cover the bids that we've gotten through the church building. Another thing that he is doing to help blunt the cost of the cost increases is that he is trying to consolidate volumes of commodities as much as possible to get that volume discount and also get a lock in on the market when we're going out for, say, even PVC piping or copper piping. Now, one thing that's working in our favor is that we don't have a lot of wood in our building. I would have never thought that I would have said that, but that is a good thing because wood is one of the most volatile commodities right now. So our general contractor has been very proactive. When necessary, he has reached back out to the architect to investigate alternative materials to try to blunt some of that. Right now, based on the pricing that we've gotten back through the church, the stage of proposals on the church, we're right on. We have been able to deal with those price fluctuations in a very positive way. Oh, okay. And then the safety net, yes. So the safety net is that FEMA actually allows two contingencies for inflation. And so when they take our base number that we have calculated and handed to them for the structures and buildings, they then start layering contingencies onto that number, and they allow for inflation, and they allow for material fluctuations. So that is built into the number that we know we'll be getting from FEMA.
One of the things that I'll just kind of highlight again, just to remind you, is this is again another timing thing, is that if we had had insurance much sooner and we'd had FEMA much sooner, all of these big spikes in costs would have been a totally different discussion. But it's amazing how God said, you guys are in a big hurry. I know it's coming. Hold on, okay? Because the way that they base their numbers, we are at a point now where they are truly looking at the costs based upon more accurate nowadays numbers versus what it would have been a year ago, 6 months ago even. And all of that helps us because we can come in with a true argument to say, you've got to make sure that you take this into account. And so they can. So it's really cool about that. Yes, sir.
I think this will be simple. On the timeline,
Yes, ma'am.
under interior finishing, I see that audio and lighting and interior signage are in progress. How can that be?
What we were told at the very beginning of the project is that AV people are notorious for slowing a project down, so get them involved soon, get them involved quickly. We were also told that audiovisual and lighting, that's AVL's audiovisual and lighting, I'm sorry. Signage is another one because of the fact that what will happen is many times they're so used to coming in and retroactive, being whether remodels or something like that, that's more of where they are. to get them involved sooner helps us then to deal with things like, have you ever thought about room numbers on a new building? You know, just the labeling of things and making sure that things line up. And in fact, in some ways, we were a little too late on some things, and we've got a solution, but we had to work with our signage people to come up with a solution for what was a construction label versus what is going to be usable labels. Signage is also important because that deals with your landscaping, how far setbacks are, where will your main signs be. They have to start getting permits, and that could affect the way a parking lot is set up. There's a lot. It's just little things that we're grateful for the construction intuition that our architect has had. So to say they're in progress, if you ask Les, who is leading the sub-team for signage, he would say, you better believe it's in progress because there's been a lot of hours already spent, which is amazing, but yet it's put us that much closer to being almost move-in ready when the keys are handed to us. We're not waiting on some of these entities, but it also has helped shape even some of the design to confirm some of that. Part of that has to do with the fact that, you have a light switch somewhere. Okay, I can't put a sign there. You have emergency lighting, and a lot of that goes even with securities and all of these other things. They are in progress because wiring for all of that. If I have to power something, I've got to get with an electrician. Well, that is a whole lot easier when everything's opened up and conduit is being run. It's a whole lot better than now having to cut out a piece of sheetrock because you need something there now, and you actually are backing the project up more, wasting time and money. So it has really saved us a lot of time for a lot of these things to start the process. But good question. Okay, yes.
On the budget layout, there was a section for improvements. Is that the stuff that's required by the state to update our coding, or is that stuff that we had kind of earmarked that we hoped to change?
Okay, I made the charts while they're asking. Mike usually speaks for the numbers, so this is my little interpretation. A point that wasn't made earlier that I think we should be real clear about is all of the FEMA funds are based on what it would take to have rebuilt what we had. So this very large number budget doesn't come out of something that we wish for. It comes out of the correct market interpretation of what would it take to have gotten back what we had. And that's what we're working from. Out of what it would take to get that back, then we can say, all right, how would we take that same money and use it in a different shape than what we had? That tiny little sprice for improvement does reflect the north property, and we think we've described how that's benefited us already. And any other allowances for things that we will do a little differently better than what we had before as compared to a dead match. The rest of the circle implies that we're getting back the same square footage organized differently than what we had before, but effectively the same size of property.
Does that answer? Okay. Other questions? In the back there, Rhoda?
I'm just curious about all the pretty glass that you're using in the buildings. Is it like glass you would see like in front of a grocery store, that type of thickness? Or is this a super duper dandy thicker glass? I just think about, cars going into buildings or people just for meanness or something. How thick or what kind of glass is it? That's what I'm asking.
Well, I mean, we're not building something for the sake of protecting a president of the United States, I can tell you that. But at the same point, there's a lot of consideration taken to this for security, for safety. There are primary features that's integrated into the glass. There's also a glazing that goes over the exterior of the glass that is a coating that is actually able to resist a lot of, I guess you would say, intrusion and things like this. The other facet you've got to remember is that our building is set much further off the road than it was originally. We are quite a distance back. There are retaining walls. There are things like this. And so the nature of being able to just simply drive a vehicle in and just barge through, I would say that if we're at that level of threat, there's not even ability to say that if we have bars on the doors, they're going to be stopping that. We would need to understand that there is a risk no matter what we do when we make ourselves available to the public. Beyond that, though, the thermal nature, the way that our handling of systems, HVAC and heating and cooling, things like that, we're dealing with a very updated and very modern, the types of materials that's used. So yes, it's very temperate, it's very durable, it's meant to be very resistant. In fact, we are coming out of a wind event, and so a lot of that has to do with what we're allowed to do to upgrade to help us even resist some of the higher winds. So that gives us some measure of durability and things like that as well. The exact construction of it, I'm not going to try to explain it all because honestly, it's way over my head. But it wouldn't be, like this. This is going to be a much the thermal quality and things like this. I don't know if any of the other have researched any of that. Stan, or anybody else has researched any of that specifically? Right. Right, yeah, and one of the things that, Matt was emphasizing is that there are protective measures. Like I said, there are retaining walls, there are structures that's part of the natural frontage there. Vehicles are not going to be able to just simply, unless they're driving a Mack truck. I mean, honestly, it'd have to be something very egregious, and like I said, beyond that point, we probably are at a greater risk than just somebody trying to just do damage at that point. Right. Yeah, there's a 3M that Stan was referred to. There's a 3M glazing that goes over it. It has some resistance to small caliber fire. It's definitely resistant. It's not completely, but it would allow us to recognize there's a threat, get out of the area, and things like that. Somebody isn't just going to be able to crash through. There's videos of this. You can check it out where people are trying to break into banks and different things like this type of stuff that's on glasses, doors and things like that, and banks and different places. And it definitely is a deterrent from people trying to just simply use the glass as a means of quick access to the facility. And so there is that facet of it, that's there as a protective measure.
It's
Yes.
Rhoda's fault.
She made me think, and you just touched on it a little bit.
I just didn't hear the question. I'm sorry. What happened there? Okay, go ahead. Now I can hear you.
What she said made me think, like in the old property, we would have people driving through around the playground, into the property, all these different things. So one thing I'm wondering is, like, when we're not there, when we come to different events, when things are going on, and the parking and the property security, what kind of things do we need to know?
Well, the neat thing about the way our new facility will be is all of the parking is on the external portion of the building, so no passing through the middle of campus anymore. And so everything is on the outside of the buildings, so to speak, on the perimeter. Part of that then would be what we will have is a much more easily manageable space for our security teams to be able to examine and to walk through and be a part of. And so it does help us in that regard. But beyond that, there is really the sense that the buildings there's fencing and things like that, that deter people from being able to walk where we would be having gatherings, playgrounds, and all those things are going to be inside of a protected area instead of them being wrapped up and part of the parking and access to that. Good questions. Anybody else? Oh, no.
Maybe three. I know Mr. Stan said there was plenty of parking. Actually, how many spaces are right there at the church? Not beyond, way down.
I would say it's close to half, if not at least,
I mean, how many spaces are we talking about?
probably close to 150 to somewhere around. Where it actually breaks and where it starts and stops is going to be difficult because there's going to be some facets of use that's going to be using part of the school facility up on the top there. So I would say as far as what would be right around the actual church building, from 150 parking lots at least, parking spaces, at least that, I would say probably closer to, within that, really what would feel comfortable, you're looking at close to 200, somewhere in there, 150 to 200 parking spots.
Okay, so I think we average maybe 300, 400?
Total is 338 on the current construction, right.
I mean attendance, I'm sorry.
How many
Attendance, I think we generally have, in the past, had about 300 to 400.
in our church?
Right.
Okay, yes, right. When I came here, when I first came pre-corona, we were right at 400 people.
Okay, so the church grows?
Yes.
Where's this parking spaces?
Well, there is, I mean, you got to remember, this keeps going. The 338 parking spots go all the way up, and then there is the facet of even the north property. We have the ability to go over towards mission housing. We have the children's center. We have other places where other parking can temporarily. But at this point, everything that allows us for our capacity, we have enough parking spaces for capacity. Fire marshal would frown on us if we're going to go beyond that, which means then that if we get to that point, we're probably looking at 2 services and other things at that point, which then kind of divides up the parking need as we go forward.
Okay, and another second question, I thank you all for allowing us to see that virtual tour. That was wonderful. I don't recall seeing any kind of kitchen facility in the church. Is there any kind of kitchen area in the church?
Yes, in that cafe, where the hospitality, the cafe area, there is what's called a warming kitchen there. There will be certain types of kitchen instruments there, but up in the larger section where the actual fellowship area would be in the church and the cafeteria area there, that's where the large full-fledged kitchen section will be once that's built. That's where pretty much all of our main fellowships will be happening anyway, is up in that area. But in order to have a small reception or family with a funeral or something like that, we would have that other kitchen down there as well to be able to plug in crock pots and have warming areas and racks and microwaves and things of that nature. We're just not allowed to have a cooking surface because that would require a big oven vent, and we didn't really want to put the money into that when we have a full-fledged cooking kitchen just up a little ways.
That sounds wonderful. Okay, one more.
You're good?
See, you're not scared yet, right?
Yeah.
Okay, again, if I remember correctly in that virtual tour, in the auditorium, there was a whole wall with glass.
Yes.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
What's the thinking behind that? 'Cause I'm thinking that could easily be a very distracting if we're trying to listen to you and then all this stuff going out there on that road. What would we
Nobody listens to me anyway, so. No, the nature of that is, again, where we're going to be situated, the distractions and things. You got to understand, the building isn't like in a true parallel. There is an angle to it. Okay, so your line of sight isn't going to be naturally looking to the road and things of this nature. Beyond that, there too is it's got a lot of natural shade to it in the sense of the angle of the sun, but also there's louvers and things, so you're not getting a lot of intense direct light and things of that nature from the outside. As far as traffic and distractions there, the elevation puts us a little bit above the road, so really cars in a lot of ways are not going to be really seen up until they're well past the structure up near the Children's Center almost. So there's a lot of those things that have been taken account. Beyond that, there are blinds that we can bring down and things like this to help with if we've got a special presentation or something along that line, if we feel like that's becoming an issue.
So the thought behind the design was to be
It's more of a transparency, more open. Right. I think it conveys to the community that, this is not a group of people that are, hidden, and we're really wanting to be naturally open and open to the community. Communicates a lot of that.
See, that didn't hurt.
There you go. Good. Other questions? I need some questions I can get these guys asking answers to. Sorry. All right. Any other? Rhoda's got another one. And Does- You have a question? Oh, okay.
What is the full capacity of the sanctuary?
I believe it's 750. I believe that's the full capacity, 750. Other questions? Okay, Scott, go ahead.
My children have asked if there's going to be fish in the retaining pond.
Fish. We have been told, okay, I can neither confirm nor deny this statement, but I've been told that eventually, yes, there will be, and not because we stock it, but because birds and other animals like that will drop fish, as they're enjoying the delicacies, and they will just kind of over time start to inhabit that. But let's be clear about this. This is not a retention pond, it's a detention pond. I had to go look it up too, okay? But the difference is that technically it is not intended to permanently hold water. But what we have been told by our construction people is that they used some types of clay in the basin of that, and that unless it gets into a drought period or we go through an extended time without rain, that will probably always have a little bit of water in it. And so anyway, so we've talked about kayaks and paddle boats, and no, we'll see what the Lord provides there. But good question. Yes, sir, down here. Just say we've got people listening. You got it there. Thanks, Greg.
With the pond situation you're talking about, would that pond be just a hole with a bunch of water stagnant, or will it be circulating to keep it not smelling?
Right now, it's it's stagnant, but we're working with the engineer to figure out ways to keep that from happening, because I'm also concerned about mosquitoes and things like that. So we are talking with our engineer about how we can actually kind of bring that and purpose that into the campus. What can we do with that to create walking trails, and what are we allowed to do with that structure? We have to figure it out because of maintenance anyway. We have to keep it mowed, and we have to do all that. So what are we allowed to do in that area? So because of the fact that we have all of our sport fields and things like that pushing up back towards that area, and then that whole, right now it's about 4 or 5 acres back there that it's kind of just open, for some things. We're actually kind of trying to figure out how do we bring that in and tie that in. So one of the big questions is can we put a circulating, fountain? We don't have necessarily power back there, so we've looked at solar. We're looking at some options so that it doesn't become this big green ugh back there before long. So yes, yeah, thank you. In the back, Dennis?
What kind of security will be on the building? Everybody had a key. Guys could go in and play in the gym at any time they wanted. The security of the buildings wasn't that great in the past. So what kind of are we looking at?
Okay. I'm going to let somebody else, Matt's got it.
All
Okay.
right, I've got it. Thank you. There's a lot of measures being taken. Some of those already referred to, so I won't go back through all those. We have been spending a lot of time with a professional consultants on how to manage and control the building of all of those facilities. And so it's going to be a new day for Grace Baptist Ministries when it comes to security. And so it's going to be amazing from the level of locking and perimeter control, cameras, just an array of, that's part of improvements that was actually being talked about that can happen when you're building from scratch. So I'll just say that it's going to be extensive. John Parshall is the head of that sub-team, and so I had volunteered that I would speak for him. So when you see him, just tell him about how great I communicated on his behalf, that John, really, you don't need to speak. Matt can do it for you. Do that, since he's not here.
Good. Any other questions? We've alluded to, some of the improvements and things like that. One of the areas that is not necessarily tied to that, necessarily that sliver that he's talking about, but a part of the building aspect is thinking about how do we maintenance the facilities, how do we make sure that the upkeep and staffing and all those things, how do we keep that in perspective? One of the facets that we're incorporating into our new facility is what's called FMX. It is a software database that allows us to take all of our electronics and electrical equipment and maintenance would need, and like HVAC and all those types of things, plug it in, and so if a light's out in a room, if a plug's not working, if the heat's too hot in this room and freezing cold in this room and things like that, this FMX software allows staff members to plug in a work order, and our teams of maintenance workers are able to make sure to take that into account and get that fixed. It'll even spit out a request to get the filters changed and things of this nature. Also tied to that is how do we then look at the general appearance of our campus? What are some ways that we need to be careful that we aren't building a campus and a facility and then watching it just degrade over time because we just can't give it the attention, the upkeep that it needs? And especially in relation to the fact that as Stan, and I don't know if you caught it on one of the slides, 27% now of our campus is greener than it was before, meaning that we have added back to open spaces. 27% of our campus is more open now, meaning that it has what's considered green space. Tied to that is a lot to do with the management of our sport fields and how we try to take care of and maintain those. The facet that the committee, the Darcy, was focused on is our campus is not like a lot of other school campuses. It's tied to a church. And as a church school, there are times that we are using pieces of our property for a lot of different purposes and doing that within hours and days of different major events. So how do we keep things from getting overextended, overused, beaten up, and then not being to use them at all? So we, as a subcommittee and a team, went and did some exploration, and it was discovered that the nature of part of that upkeep and maintenance and long-term was to take all of our sport fields and make them into artificial turf. And so we are going to be using artificial turf on the soccer football team fields and the baseball softball fields. And there is an area called the Quad, which is a large area that is in the middle of the campus that goes between a lot of the buildings and kind of ties in all of those different fields, and that also will be turf. And so what that does is that allows us to have a surface that has a long life expectancy. At the same time, we're not going to have to mow it, and we don't have to deal with the maintenance and the upkeep in that setting. It'll be the facets of being able to keep it. Water irrigation is you're not required to water artificial turf. So there's a lot of cost savings in that. But for us, the big thing was the turnaround time. To be able to have a football game on a night, but yet still be able to that Sunday have a church event, and we're not in the middle of a mud field because of the fact that the football players have torn up the sod, soccer players, and even in the other places. And so for the cost of that up front, the long-term savings and effect of that, we felt that that would save us a lot in the long run. But those are some of that really is the only big decision to this point that we've had to kind of think about at the front of this, and that's because of the fact that we're in the midst of grading and getting things ready so that this can all come together at this time. So those are just some examples of what has been explored as options to this point, as an example of how do we make sure that we build a campus as well that won't be such a burden and a taxation, to try to make sure that we can also help our maintenance teams and different people as we work to the future. Any other questions? Down here. Got one there and one, Mrs. Poff. I think there was another hand over here somewhere. That's okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so does that qualify as green space if it's artificial?
Yes, it does.
It doesn't give off any oxygen?
Well, it doesn't give off oxygen, but it's the idea of green space is that the water is able to drain, and it doesn't add to the stress on the dispersion of water and things of that nature. So it for whatever reason, they call it a green space.
Well, that's crazy. Okay, is there going to be any natural growing?
Yes.
Foliage?
Well, we have some fake trees that we're planting. No. No, really, all of the aspect of what we wanted in the natural sense was then the shrubs and the flowers and things like that to be more in controlled areas where, those are not going to get trampled by students and other people and different ones. But in those larger areas, that's really the places then. But yes, in the front and in some of the other places out on the perimeter, most of that will still be. So yes, they still will have to use a mower and they still will have to pull out a weed eater every once in a while. In fact, the entire top north 4 acres that we purchased, the newer portion, all of that is going to be natural grass as well. It's really more in these areas where we have student athletes and the multiple use right in the heart of the campus there. Is that where it is? Man, I'm getting good at this. Okay. All right, was there another question? Okay. Oh, no.
Not a question, it's a compliment. I really do love the design of the baptistry. I think that's wonderful.
Amen.
How it makes it so inclusive with family or whatever.
Good. Thank you. That's a good one. Other questions? Over here.
When you have a football game, will there be parking close to the football field, or do they park in the front and walk back, or what?
Yes, as we said, all the parking is to the outside along Jenkins and down Shallowford. So to any outdoor athletic event, people will have to walk, or as in some cases, be in a wheelchair and roll, all the way back through the building, through the perimeter, through security, and come to those fields, which is not unlike most major athletic competitions. There is a distance for parking. So we felt that was part of that design. So there is a sidewalk. It comes through. Actually, it's a really cool gateway for the Golden Eagles, and I won't go into trying to describe it, but it's right between the lower school and the upper school proper. Right there, Pastor. Well done. There is a gold with glass to the left of your screen. If you can just pick it out past that all-natural tree, Sherry, and the beautiful green shrubbery, that is the entrance to the outdoor athletic complex, as well as for church gatherings, whether it's the 4th of July or a Sunday evening out on the quad. Oh my goodness, there's so many beautiful experiences that can happen going right through that gate, which is actually going through a building. Above it is a hallway. And to each of sides, the left and the right, will be secure. You will not be able to enter the buildings when we secure those. But that hallway is closed off with a roll-up garage door. So there's your entrance going back through on a beautiful plaza sidewalk that rolls back through there. Really well designed.
I'm going to add one thing to that, Matt, and that we were talking about security earlier and the different features that we have implemented to improve security. The fact that we've got a single entrance into all those athletic and recreational venues is part of what we have done intentionally to improve from the campus as it was, where you'd get on campus and you wouldn't know where people were driving. There were a dozen parking spots here, a couple over there. You knew about the secret lot back there. We aren't going to have people driving all over the campus, and they're not going to be walking all over the campus. It's going to be a very controlled access into the buildings and back into the fields.
We can also make sure we collect all your money. How many of you have slipped into a game the back door? Okay, not you, but I can tell you it happened in the old place. You came around the secret entrance to fields, and hey, we just park over here and come through the fence where there's a hole there. But yeah, there's that one big boulevard coming in.
And to that point too, there will be, ADA parking, things like that, pretty close to proximities to try to make it as, and drop-off points and things, so people can pull someone up to that entrance, and then it's a little bit of a jump, but it's not that far. I mean, when you consider the size and scope of that, but we've tried to make it that way as well. Other questions? I felt like there was something I was... Okay. Have we done it? Have we exhausted your curiosity? It's funny because a lot of us felt like, okay, when we say $54 million, as everybody, the proverbial air just gets sucked out of the room. What I want to reiterate, I'm just consistently amazed at how God has put us into an opportunity to be provided for in ways that we didn't even think possible when we heard and realized that we were so underinsured, which, by the way, we are rectifying, and that in itself is being dealt with. I just want to confirm that little bit as well, but that is at the definite top of the list now to make sure that this doesn't happen again. FEMA has also made that a stipulation that if you get into another event, they will expect that you have reached, as best as your knowledge to make sure that you are insured, or they will not help you in the future either, which I've already determined I really never, ever want to have to deal with FEMA ever again. But at the same point, I'm just grateful for the work that's being done by others, especially Mike, who has really taken that to task to make sure that we aren't undervalued, insured in the future, so that we don't have to go through this process again. No other questions? Doc, you don't have any questions? Or is that Armando's? All right, yeah, okay. Okay. I'm going to make sure the Darcy members stay up here for just a little bit longer, or at least not necessarily here. You don't have to come and kneel before them or anything like that. But if you have some other specific questions you want to ask them, okay, it looks like we got one. Okay, I talked just long enough for Judy to ask a question. All right, go ahead, Judy.
All right, there are a lot of wonderful men up there, and I appreciate everything, all the work that has been done. But I just wondered, are there any women that are able to give any input on any committee?
All the way through it. In fact, two of...
Anybody ask me a question?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Matt says that there's a reason for that. No, we've had people within our own church. Camilla Borma has had helped me establish a group of ladies to talk about some things in relation to colors and things like that. There are two strategic ladies that work for Rardin Carroll that are in interior design that we have valued their investment as well as their prowess. So yes, on a lot of these subcommittees and different ones, there have been others that of the other gender. And in fact, it was kind of funny because we brought that up. We need to make sure that people know that it's not just a bunch of 10 guys up here that's making all these decisions, and guys being gender specifically in that case, but there have been invested inputs and thoughts of people from varying perspectives, because we really wanted to get a wide range of opinions on this, so that it didn't come across as a very narrow group of people. But even decisions that, contradicted ours as the way that this would be better in the long run and things like this. So it's all throughout. And you have to understand that we really started the design phase of this in pretty much May of it's been pretty much a year. We have been actively looking at this. So to get to this point, everything with the design and things like this, even when we presented a lot of these things to you, those things these virtuals, there are several pieces of even some of these virtuals that there are no solar panels on the roofs anymore and things like this, just because it's not practical and it wasn't truly what we could afford or do. We had to rule things out for now. In time, that might be something, but we just felt like there were edits and adjustments that we've had to make. Even in the virtual, I don't know if you remember me saying, even in the virtual, some of the ways that the rooms were laid out in the map, That's not the current design because we end up having to put a fire escape in a particular area that isn't shown on there and things of this nature. So that design is constantly being tweaked and adjusted and things of that nature.
I just wanted to add, you referenced a number of things there from the church perspective, but the school, let me assure you wholeheartedly, and I think I was the one making those points earlier about who all was involved. Stan described sub-teams, but we didn't list. I would have loved to have had a slide with all of the people who have contributed, but it would take more than one slide for you to be able to read them. And we didn't allow Stan to have that much time. So the number of people that are contributing, including alumni, parents, school board members, church board members, church staff, whether it's Pam Dratton or Camilla, you go through some of those. But on the school side, our teachers are involved in the design, our administrators from Nancy Cooper and all of her elementary staff, Alice Lawrence and Pam Carter in the library, fine arts spaces with Melissa Farrell and Jessica Box. You know, we have been sitting for hours with them. So what you didn't hear, and I'm glad you asked, Judy. I am so glad you asked because I wanted the point to be made, and we hadn't made the point. We hadn't emphasized it well enough, so thank you for asking. We are really getting a lot of input from other sources than these guys here, because if you'd listen to them, you'd be kind of nervous. No, it's really fun to talk with people, ask them questions, and especially those who have invested, as you said, Heather and Elizabeth. Elizabeth happens to be one of our alumni, which is awesome. And to those two young ladies, to be able to give us guidance and for us to listen to them and follow their advice is really enjoyable to see what's coming forth from their expertise, all of the experience that they have. 750 plus churches and schools that have been designed by this group. In case you didn't hear that way back months ago, what a tremendous resource we have in Rardon and Carroll across the Southeast. 750 plus churches and schools that they have designed. They know what they're doing. They've got some great input, and they allow us to personalize it, but I have to add that.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if you could tell us what the different men up there kind of fill in on with different subcommittees. I know Tom is in charge of all things salvaging, packing, and trailering.
Well,
but I know
right.
each one of them has
Sure.
done different subcommittees. Can we just
Yes,
learn what
okay.
they're doing for our knowledge?
Right. I mean, you know, Matt, obviously, and Matt and Mike and I we deal with more of the day-to-day interactions and things of this nature. Obviously, Matt with the school really has gathered and brought together a lot of the groups and inputs and fielding a lot of the questions from the architect and from Tyson that's dealing with school. Mike and I really field a lot of things specifically just related to the church proper, but in a lot of ways even the next layer up of overall tying everything together, making sure we're on that. Mike is predominantly the voice to FEMA. He is the man that really interacts heavily with the key leaders, primarily Andrew, Noah, and Michael. Those three men are representative of FEMA, and Mike interacts with them, fielding a lot of the questions, and then with our consultant, and then he gets us involved, especially Stan, Matt, and myself, on those different sub-conversations to confirm what we're going to be giving to FEMA and things like that. Alan has been a part of a lot of different things because of his expertise in the food industry, has really given us a lot of input, great input on the kitchens, but has also been instrumental in helping us in discovering with the fields and a lot of the sport complexes. But beyond that, just the years of experience in leadership and management, he has been able to help us investigate and think through questions of how we organize questions even for FEMA, but also really for local contractors and things like that, helping us with Tyson. I mentioned earlier, Les has been very strategic on the signage portion, and then also involved with some of the sports, helping Bob Ateka, the AD, in some of the conversations related to that. Greg is really, he's the guy that keeps all of our notes straight, and but also has helped us even with some of the other discussions about finances and the budgeting. Working with Stan has helped us kind of boil down some of our expressions and spreadsheets and things like that. Has been active in that, but and the Finance Committee liaison. We've got several. You'll see we've got deacon representation, Finance Committee representation, staff, and things like that. I mentioned Mike Paul is working with IT and predominantly with mission housing, and then also management, energy management. He is helping us understand how electrical components that all of us kind of yawn at. He gets excited when he gets a blueprint and follows all the wires. I do not get that guy. But in any case on that, but he's been very good about strategically making sure that we are looking through what the engineers in that lingo and things like that. That's just, I just get to what it looks like. He gets to see what holds it all together. So that's been good. Obviously, Stan he's everything. He really is trying to keep all of us working effectively together. Tom, you're right. He is the backbone in a lot of ways for us. And I mean, the strength of getting things, he knows where all the bodies literally are buried. And where things are in the warehouse between him and Fred, they have worked hours getting things organized and off of trailers and back into trailers, and trailers moved and trailers gone. And then now he has been kind of tasked, he and Alan have been tasked to help us with our ministry outreach that we're initiating and connecting with the Pray It Forward and different groups and making sure that we're communicating and trying to get Gen-C involved and different ones, making sure that we have that. And then I mentioned Matt. So John Parshall, who's not here, is leading predominantly the security portion of that. And then he just asked the question that everybody wishes they could ask but don't dare, but John will ask it. And that's his job, is to keep us honest and but moving and very encouraging. I can honestly say that all 9 of these guys are a tremendous encouragement, and they are passionate about our church and about our school, about the ministry of grace, and have really taken to task the responsibility of making sure that we are very much aware of what God has handed to us, and let's not be stingy, but let's also not be foolish. And they have scrutinized through design. They've scrutinized through all of these things to make sure that we can build a structure. Did I miss anybody? Anything? Any other areas of responsibility that I missed? Okay. Yeah. We're having a sidebar conversation here. Another thing I just want to broach is, some people will say, okay, well, if insurance and FEMA is going to pay for everything, then why are we having Greater Grace and Transforming Grace funds? And why are you keep asking me to give? Part of that is actually, it is a sense of, I'm going to give it in 2 parts. There's the part that simply says, if we believe that FEMA is the solution and we have no role in that, then I think we've misaligned our value system. I think we need to recognize that we need to be a people that practice generosity and faithfulness and contributing to what God has placed before us, because we don't have guarantees. There are no guarantees except God. And so we take and we contribute, and I think it creates a heart in us of not expectancy or entitlement, but a heart of generosity and desire to see the ministry prosper and grow and to be able to accomplish things. Tied to that then is there are areas where if we could take and expand the idea of improvements, there is a sense that there are places where we would like to be able to do more, to do things that we did not have an opportunity within our facilities to do prior to the tornado. One example inside of the church itself is there are things that we would like to do inside of our youth department, inside of the youth room. There are things that we'd like to do inside of our children's area, things that we could do to improve not just the aesthetics, but to give them resources and abilities to expand and to minister more effectively in other ways, not necessarily effectively, but with greater resources and tools to do so effectively. One of those being an indoor playground for our children, so that if there is inclement weather and we need a place for them to go, we can do that. There will be an outdoor playground, but this indoor one would also create something that is a safe environment for our children at a certain age. There are things within our children's ministry. There are certain ways they'd like to decorate and use some of these apparatuses and different things to give it more character, more children-friendly environment and things of this nature than just simply 4 square walls and doing a little paint. But that's going to cost a little bit extra in our budget. There's things up in the school, things that we have been really wanting to do because of the changes in the trades and things of this nature, like STEM labs and STEAM labs, computer labs and science labs and home ec labs and all these things that we had a modicum of, but we really didn't necessarily have rooms that were outfitted as well as we would like, and we were already trying to raise funds for those things, and a donor base and people invested in those. And so all of these things go to allow us to do something beyond just simply making us whole. The 148,000 square feet with everything in it to be able to come back in and do church and do school and do all the ministries that we choose to do. Yeah, we can do that, but there are some things that we'd like to do beyond that, to be even better than that, to go beyond those places and to do more and to be able to do so effectively. And so those funds, as they come in, allow us to expand resources, technologies, aesthetics, and ways and to expand the reach and the influence and the impact that Grace could have. And so we do encourage you to recognize that as we start talking about these numbers and things like that, to have those funds so that we can look to that, and we're building the entirety of the campus with that. It allows us then to contribute to these specific areas as the funds come in, and we can continue to put those improvements into place.
Could you explain the difference between Greater Grace and Transforming Grace?
Sure. There's not any. The real heart of that is Transforming Grace was already an existing fund inside of the school to help them with some development projects that they had. When the tornado happened, the question was, then what happens to those funds? Greater Grace was something that also allowed us to take the 2020 vision funds and things like that and boil those down into something that would allow us to then move those funds into something more designed to, well, that project doesn't exist anymore. It got wiped off the map. The idea, too, is that there are ways, and I'll use Les as an example. Les deals a lot with the development of the school specifically, but he and I are working together to try to figure out strategic ways for both church and school. How do we take on and tackle and present certain key projects that we like to see developed over the course of this project? And so there are some foundations, for example, certain entities and groups out there that, and this is the way I just present it, and I know there's some probably a better answer in part, and I'll let one of them maybe address this, but there are certain entities and groups that will not contribute to a church, but they'll contribute to a school. And so the idea was to keep that as something then that would give them the confidence and also keep that earmarked as specifically given as something that is focused on school. But the overall intention of our in-house understanding is it's all going to the same project. We're trying to build back Grace Baptist Ministries. So Greater Grace, Transforming Grace is really one fund, but there are ways that we can use that to target specifically different entities. So I'm going to let one of those guys talk to that if I needed to clarify anything on that.
I think that was really good.
Okay. I've been listening some. Okay.
He's been paying attention.
Does that answer the question? And the idea is that Transforming Grace allows people, if they are really more focused from the school side, to be able to contribute because there is something that connects with them from the school. Greater Grace is really us as church, as Grace Baptist Church. That's the one that gets predominantly expressed in here because of the fact that it's tied to the whole of it. Transforming Grace is a fund that was already existent, is just rolled up inside of Greater Grace, basically. Any other questions?
Just out of curiosity, with all the new school building, new programs, and new equipment that we might get, would that at all influence the tuition of Grace? Or can you tell me that, or do you think?
Tuition costs, are we going to see a hike because of all the new?
This has zero to do with tuition. That doesn't affect that at all.
Good answer. And the right answer. I mean, the beautiful thing is we are not actually increasing necessarily our cost. In fact, we're being told that some of our costs are going to, and some, I mean, I'm talking about building. Other things, we'll see where that leads, and that'll be the natural progress of time. That's just something school and school board will have to evaluate as they move forward. But as of right now, we're excited to see that this is something that'll put us back to whole and being able to manage those expenditures. Good. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Carly?
Will the present mission house get fixed up and look pretty?
We're in the process of getting it painted and trimmed out to sort of resemble the Children's Center in color and finishes, more of a craftsman look with wood finishes, but it will blend in on that corner and it'll become a more obvious part of our campus.
Ms. Sarah Beasley.
Hey, everybody, I came late. We were watching at home, though.
All right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Here's what I need to know, though, and you guys may have answered this question, I didn't hear it, but I have a couple of concerns. Number one, are we going to have a walking track, outside walking track around the pond with a fish in it?
You want me to answer that one right now? Okay, there is a discussion about it. We'll see what our engineers will allow us to do.
Okay, that would be so super awesome.
It would be.
Number two, a coffee shop. Are we going to have a coffee shop?
Yes, there's a cafe, coffee shop, yes. What are we calling it, Fred? Cup of Grace or something like that?
So you're going to have like a spirit store and like really good coffee? Like, you know, barista and
Oh, you talking like open to the public type coffee shop?
talking about
It,
over there, but
yeah. There is some discussion about that as a phase 14 somewhere in there, so yes.
okay, that's all I wanted to know.
All right, thank you,
Sounds
sir.
great, though, really exciting.
Amen. Amen. Anybody else? All right. Then why don't we close with a word of prayer? I'll let you be dismissed. We do have a youth group that's going to be coming in here in about 10 minutes. And then children's check-in for Awana is about 10 minutes as well. I appreciate your investment of time being here. Those of you joining us online, thank you. Again, this is not saying that all of your questions have been asked and answered, and we recognize that. Our goal is now to regularly, starting in the Sunday mornings, starting to get someone up here just sort of giving us updates as we move along. We're at that point now. We're actually going to start seeing more. This chart this timeline is going to start turning more orange and then green, which I'm very excited about. And this is something that I hope that we'll be able to kind of follow and keep our eyes on as we move forward. Father, thank you for the time we've had here tonight, and I pray that our hearts will be encouraged by what we're seeing you do. Lord, as we give, as we contribute, as we invest in our ministry, Lord, help us as faithful believers to be giving to the ongoing work of the ministry, but also specifically even to the projects that are coming, the greater grace, the transforming grace, allowing us to contribute to meet these needs and to do things to improve our opportunity of ministry and outreach. So bless us now as we head off into our week, and excited to watch our campus change and grow as buildings begin to take shape. Lord, just thank you for these men who work so many hours together. Lord, thank you for others within our church who have contributed in so many wonderful ways. Lord, just grateful for the body of believers that you've blessed us with as a church. And it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Thank you. You're dismissed. But if you have further questions, you want to talk to these guys, they'll be here for a little bit longer. Don't hesitate to do so.